Clara's journey had been long, and every mile seemed to weigh on her smaller frame, as though the dust of the prairie carried its own burden. The wagon creaked to a stop in front of the sprawling ranch house, and for a moment she just sat still, her gloved hands clutching the strap of her carpet bag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind through every bump and turn of the road, stepping down with poise, meeting the man's eyes with quiet confidence, proving herself worthy of the new life she so desperately wanted. Yet when the driver tipped his hat and muttered, "This is your stop, miss," her breath caught in her throat like a trapped bird. The ranch stretched far beyond what she could take in with one glance. Fences lined with rough posts zigzagged toward the horizon, enclosing cattle that grazed lazily under the dying sun. Barns, sheds, and outbuildings stood against the wind, their wood weathered but sturdy, a testament to years of hard work. At the center of it all rose the house, 2 stories of pale timber, its porch wide and inviting. Though at this moment it felt to Clara less like a welcome and more like judgment waiting to be handed down. The door opened, and out stepped the man she had come to marry, Elias Kane. His figure filled the doorway as though it had been carved for him alone. Tall, broad, and sun-hardened, he carried the weight of the land in his very posture. His shirt was rolled at the sleeves, revealing forearms strong from years of labor, his jaw shadowed with the stubble of someone too busy to shave. He looked at her not as a stranger eager to know her story, but as a rancher assessing whether a new horse was fit to pull the plow. Clara forced herself to breathe. She lowered herself from the wagon, her boots crunching against the dirt. Her bag swung slightly, lighter than it should have been, her belongings so few they barely filled it. She smoothed her skirt with trembling hands and took a step forward, her voice soft but clear. "Mr. Kane?" His eyes narrowed, and she could feel the weight of his judgment before he spoke. "You're smaller than I expected. I requested a sturdy woman." The words fell like a hammer. Clara's heart clenched, though she refused to let it show on her face. She lifted her chin, though she knew her small stature betrayed her, barely reaching his shoulder, her frame thin from years of work and want. But inside her burned a fire that no one had ever thought to measure. "I may not look it, Mr. Kane," she said, steadying her voice, "but I work harder than most who are twice my size." He crossed his arms, his expression unmoved. "This land doesn't care how hard you claim to work. Winter here will tear the spirit from a woman who can't stand firm against it." Behind him, a small figure appeared on the porch. A boy, 7 or 8, with hair dark as night and a stubborn cowlick sticking up. His wide eyes were fixed on Clara, curiosity lighting them like lanterns. He clung to the railing, shy but alert, as though waiting to see if she was friend or foe. Clara's heart softened despite the sting of Elias's words. "I've stood against worse winters than cold weather," she said softly, almost to herself. She thought of the nights in the city when hunger gnawed her bones, of shivering in drafty rooms, with nothing but thin blankets and thinner hope. Frail wasn't the right word for her, not after surviving all that. But before Elias could answer, a sharp cry split the air. It was shrill and sudden, the sound of pain and panic, and Clara felt it slice through her chest like a knife. She turned her head toward the corral, where the fading light revealed a figure caught in the fence. A girl no older than 16 was entangled in barbed wire. Her skirt was ripped, her hands flailing as she tried to pull free, her cries echoing across the ranch. "Good Lord," Clara whispered. Elias was already moving, striding across the yard with powerful steps. "Anna!" he shouted, and though his voice was stern, Clara caught the edge of fear in it. Without a second thought, Clara dropped her bag and ran after him. The sharp smell of iron filled her nose as she knelt beside the girl. The wire had bitten into the fabric of her dress and grazed her skin, leaving thin red lines across her arms. Clara's small hands reached for her gently. "Hush now, you'll be free in a moment," she murmured. Her voice calm even as the girl's sobs shook her. Elias pulled at the wire, his hands rough but precise, while Clara held Anna steady, soothing her panic. "You're all right," she whispered again, brushing the girl's hair from her face. "Just breathe. We've got you." Finally, with one last tug, the barbed wire snapped loose and the girl stumbled into Clara's arms. She clung to her, trembling, her breath ragged against Clara's shoulder. Clara held her close, as if she'd known her all her life. Elias's jaw tightened as he looked at them. His face was unreadable, torn between frustration and relief. Clara glanced up at him, but he said nothing, only scooped the wire aside and guided them back toward the house. By the time they reached the porch, the boy had retreated behind the doorway, peeking out like a wary kitten. Clara eased Anna into a chair, her hands still gripping Clara's, as though she might vanish if she let go. Clara finally looked Elias in the eye, searching for answers. The silence stretched until Elias spoke in a low voice. "That's Anna, my wife's sister. She's been staying here since her folks passed." Clara blinked, surprised, though it explained the tension in the air. The girl's defiance wasn't just a momentary flare, it was the rebellion of youth, trapped in grief and restlessness. Clara understood the weight of it. She had carried it herself. The kitchen filled with the smell of beans simmering on the stove as evening deepened. Clara sat at the table, Anna across from her, her face streaked with dirt and tears, but calmer now. Elias leaned against the wall, his son seated quietly beside him. The lamplight flickered over their faces, painting shadows that seemed to tell as much as their words did not. Clara realized then that she had stepped into something far more complicated than a simple arrangement of necessity. Elias had not written about Anna in his letter. He had not mentioned the boy's watchful eyes or the grief that lingered in every corner of the house. He had wanted a sturdy woman to manage chores and carry burdens. But what he needed, though he didn't yet know it, was someone who could see through walls, someone who could bind the broken pieces together with gentleness and fire alike. Clara was not sure if Elias saw it in her yet, but as Anna's fingers clung to hers and the boy's gaze softened from suspicion into trust, Clara felt something stir inside her. Maybe she had not come here by mistake. Maybe she was not too small for this life. Maybe, just maybe. The days after Clara's arrival stretched out into weeks, and though the first words Elias Kane had spoken to her still stung like a thorn in her chest, she refused to let them define her place on the ranch. Every morning she rose before the sun, her small hands red and raw from scrubbing, hauling and mending. She fetched water until her shoulders ached, cooked meals from whatever supplies were on hand, and worked the washboard until her knuckles bled. Elias watched, saying little, though his silence was not lost on her. It was the silence of a man measuring her every move, waiting for her to prove him wrong, or prove him right. At first, the boy, Matthew, kept his distance. He would hover near the doorframe, peering out with wide eyes as she worked in the kitchen. But children have a way of sensing hearts, and soon he edged closer, carrying little chores of his own, just to be near her. Clara welcomed him with quiet warmth, answering his endless questions about where she came from, what the city looked like, and how many books she had read. When he laughed, truly laughed, Elias looked up from across the room with a flicker of something soft in his eyes, quickly masked by the hardness he wore like armor. Anna, however, was another matter. The girl had fire in her veins, the kind that made her run wild through fields and resist every instruction given to her. She met Clara with suspicion, her jaw tight, her words sharp. Yet Clara did not push her. She let the girl test her limits, offering no judgment, just the quiet steadiness of someone who had once been young and angry herself. It was not until one evening, when Clara found Anna by the barn, with tears slipping silently down her cheeks, that the walls between them cracked. Clara sat beside her without a word, the two of them staring into the dusk until Anna finally whispered, "He doesn't understand me." "Nobody does." Clara placed a gentle hand on hers. "Sometimes, Tiju, are different." Clara noticed